Look, maybe I can simplify this a little bit more. When I listen to that, I think Chris thinks he's starting. Let's put it that way.
I don't. I think he knows he's not starting. He just doesn't like the fact that somebody is, going to presume something before a conversation's been had. Come on, he's an 18-year vet. The guy's been around forever.
He's Chris Paul.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm not saying I'm mad at him for it.
He's an alpha personality, which is one of the reasons you wanted him.
If I'm a future Hall of Famer, I'm like, who are you starting over me? Sure, I'd feel that way too. But the bottom line is whether he thinks he's starting right out of the gate or whether he thinks it'll something that will just sort of evolve about 10 games in, Chris Paul, like a premise that we all used 2.5 weeks ago, wow, I am sure that they called his representatives before making this deal to make absolutely sure that Chris was cool with 22 minutes a night being Jonathan Kuminga's hero and coming off the bench to run the second unit. I'm sure of that. We all said that. I know I did. I am no longer sure of that.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't have a conversation. It's just, hey, you're on this team. Well, we know he's not going to start just because they're not going to go that small. And also, they're not going to start him over Steph Curry. Were they going to bring Steph Curry off the bench?
Steiny suggested it.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And I would almost bet everything I have that it ain't going to happen.
You bleep starter, Steiny. Such a bleep starter. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I think Chris is, he understands. He's a really smart guy. He sees the whole thing. He knows exactly why he's there. He knows why he's there cap-wise. He knows why he's there, business-wise. This guy's made tons of money on the floor, probably more money off the floor. He sees it all. He just doesn't want to be approached by somebody who is a media person and big market guys after, everybody kisses their butt for 2 decades. They spar with the media. They do not play nice. They spar. And if you don't want to spar, if you're not expecting them to spar, then you're not seeing it the way it should be.
You know what? This is
the way it is.
A little bit of a tangent, but I want to challenge something you just said by calling him a big market guy. I would contend that Chris Paul has never played in a big market, and the Clippers doesn't count because they are an afterthought in that market. He got booed when they showed his face at a Dodger game. I'm telling you, if you've never lived there, you don't know the dynamic. He has never been somewhere where he is the center of the sports focus, unless you want to count Oklahoma City, and because it's the only thing going. But that's Middle America. Houston, would be your best.
You're looking at him as a player, though. He's not. His popularity and his Q rating transcends that. My wife's not a sports fan at all, and she's like, I showed her the picture of Paul. Oh, the Warriors got that guy. Why? Because she sees the State Farm commercials.
Sure. Well, that's Cliff Paul, though. He just looks like Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the same guy.
But you know what I'm saying? His popularity, and he's played in Los Angeles. I mean, he was the toast of the Dodger game the other day. His family was there. They're all in jerseys. He's just sparring with the media, and that's all. And he sparred with the media in the first question. The first time he was addressed coming to the Warriors, he didn't play nice there either. He's kind of just spars with you. He's not going to give you what you want. He doesn't feel obligated to answer your questions. He just doesn't.
And that's fine. You're allowed to handle the media however you want. I think it's interesting, though, that we're like, oh, in a big market, in this situation, when you're a big name, that's what you do. You spar with the media. You do? The other Warrior stars don't.
Yeah, well, that's what makes them special. That's actually, Steph is incredibly gracious.
Even Draymond. Draymond's not a media sparer. He spars with the refs.
Go into the Yankee clubhouse and go ask the Yankee players some questions, and they will start to spar with you. And if you go into the Marlins clubhouse or one of the younger teams in baseball, what can I do for you? Oh, pleasure to meet you, Mark. What time you want to interview me? That's fine. I'll be great.
But chicken or the egg? Part of the reason that the Yankees are sparring with you is because you're a New Yorker, and the way you asked that question was, hey, Judge, why is your toe hurt when we just gave you $360 million? Huh? That's the way questions are asked out there, so you're going to spar back. This is not that. This is San Francisco. And I, by the way, don't like it when we somehow, this market gets criticized. Oh, you don't come after people hard enough. I do it the other way around. Why are y'all acting like you do out in New York and Boston?
Yeah,
but that's
it's not always New York media. I've seen Joe Girardi and Paul O'Neill in the Yankee clubhouse spar with guys who they don't even know, and they weren't necessarily even New York writers. They were just in the Yankee clubhouse. When you just get asked all these questions and you're in, it's the kissing butt factor. When you've had your butt kissed for so long, it changes and morphs your whole outlook. That's my thought. I mean, at least I don't think you see it as much in football and hockey because there's like inherent tough guys and violence involved. But in baseball and basketball, I think you do see these guys, kind of spar more with the media.
Yeah,
and they do it for sport, and they do it because they can.
Look, that's Chris. Chris is not a warm fuzzy, and we knew that. Nobody's Steph. By the way, I'm not asking for Chris to be anyone other than who he is. We well knew who the Warriors were acquiring. It's part of why some of us weren't that comfortable with it. But I don't really care if a guy wants to spar with the media. This city loved Barry Bonds. So you can be a surly jerk if you want to be for portions of your career. That's not going to be the end-all, be-all. The end-all, be-all will be how you perform. But that's sort of the lens through which I see this, which is Chris Paul, the premise we all went with was, actually, this is a good signing because 25 minutes and off the bench and Kuminga. Well, I very much gather from this brief press briefing, that's not how Chris is viewing this. I don't think that at all. Doesn't mean it's not going to go that way, but this is, I guess, what I'm saying. After listening to that, I do feel like there is at least a mild power struggle that is going to have to take place. Someone may win it, and it may be okay, but yeah, you have 6 players who believe they're starting this year.
Yeah, I look at it as you're looking at, it's kind of like if you looked at D'Lo and thought of him as, well, how's he going to fit? He didn't fit. He was just a way to reserve the money for the Kuminga-Wiggins addition, and it wound up being great. And the same thing is going on here. They really knew they wanted to move off of Jordan. They probably had a couple other options, but Paul's a very attractive option. But he's not. You're looking at an attractive option for win, 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 and the Warriors now. I think it's much more. That move, in my mind, Mark, was made more about the pivot off of Paul in a year where you can say to somebody, here's an expiring $30 million piece, and we'll take this piece and that piece and move down the road. D'Lo wasn't here long term. Paul's not here long term. I've got realtor buddies that have dealing with Chris Paul right now, and he's going
to rent.
Well, he's looking for a place. He's looking for a place that he can be for 1
year. Of course.
He's not going to be here more than 1 year. He may not even be here the full year. No. But this isn't about Paul, and that wasn't about D'Lo. It's about what you can turn D'Lo into, and this is going to be about what they can pivot off of Paul towards.
I totally agree with you, and that's partially the financial aspect of that, and that's always been the aspect of this that I like. I like that they turned Jordan Poole's 4 years into 1 year, and that will allow them to keep flexibility and probably allow them to keep Klay Thompson on the team. So I'm in full support of that. But let's not forget the basketball aspect this year, because that matters too. I don't know how many years Steph Curry's got left, and this is one of them. And I don't want it to go up a creek because everybody started fighting again, which is what happened last year. So this is important. It's funny to me that 2.5 weeks ago, this fan base despised Chris Paul, and based on the feedback that I'm getting right now from what I'm saying, it appears that in 2.5 weeks, you've all decided to love him. Because now, apparently, this is just crazy. What a crazy take that this surly exchange in his opening presser, this is his opening availability to the Golden State Warriors media, and his first thing that he said to any of the "we're going to be here every night" crew, including Kendra Andrews, was, "You coaching?"
Well, just
that's his intro.
I mean, in NBA trades, you can evaluate in like 5 seconds. When you saw that they were moving off, for D'Lo, did you think, oh, great fit? No, your first thought was, oh, that's a bad fit, and it is a bad fit. And your first thought when you saw Chris Paul was, that's an awkward bad fit, and it is an awkward bad fit. So anything else is an explanation. Anything else is a spin. Anything else is some deferred gratification. It's not a good fit. Steph's a point. He's a point. Steph's a starter. He's a starter. He's got a huge ego. He's never come off the bench, but he does have some attributes. He'll take better care of the basketball than Jordan Poole. He'll maybe get Jonathan Kuminga better, set him up at the rim a little bit more. There's some positive attributes. They'll be smarter with the basketball, but trying to convince yourself that Chris Paul is a basketball fit on the Warriors is, that's just people with Warrior goggles who badly don't want to look at this year as a wasted year and are like, this has got to work, and let me come up with some ideology or some thought process that makes it all fit. It doesn't fit. It wasn't a good option.
So are you feeling like this year is going to be like a wasted year? It sounds to me like, and maybe that's where we're like feeling a little bit different about this. I'm not willing to blow off this year.
Well, I'm not willing to blow off this year, but I think what the Warriors looked at Poole and thought, how many teams around the league are going to take that huge money deal for this broken player, a player that I see as broken. And then they looked at, okay, how many teams potentially would take Chris Paul and his expiring $30 million that they can just immediately pivot off of any player they want. I just think they looked at it as the lesser of two evils. They knew they wanted to move on from Poole. This gave them flexibility down the road. I don't think it's about what Paul contributes. I think it's about what they can turn Paul into on the back end.
Yeah, but I know for a fact that there were other players who only have 1 year of control left who would have been better fits, and the Warriors made phone calls on those players, and they were all told no. You know what I mean? Like, what you're saying is accurate in that the list of teams interested in Jordan Poole is very, very short.
And I wouldn't be surprised. They devalued him by overpaying him dramatically.
Well, but they didn't know that at the time. I mean,
I said it at the time. I thought it was an overpay. I mean, I know some people felt the same way. $35 million for a guy who plays half the game.
Well, he's going to make 28 this year.
But I mean, at one of those years, he's getting 35.
At the end, sure.
And that was way too much. Talking about a guy who plays matador defense, thinks he's Steph Curry, doesn't like to drive, when he doesn't have a great relationship with officials. He should live at the foul line. I mean, there's so many parts of his game that just don't make sense. And it's like, you know what? It wasn't a great fit. They gave him a contract. They probably shouldn't have given him. They looked for ways to pivot off of it. This was probably one way that they felt like they could pivot, get off Jordan, and get an asset that they feel like at some point is going to be of value.
I guess, but if they don't sign that contract, they have no control over what happens this offseason, and they might not get anything in return at all.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, that's
why you do sign the deals.
Yeah. And also $30 million, it's funny, as we look at that and we go, oh my, this is a dramatic overplay. It's like half of a max contract. Like $30 million is not a superstar.
No.
$30 million is like a really, really nice player. And I think that at the time, with where Jordan was, that's where we thought it was going. And he was one of the top 50 scorers in the NBA this year. And so that is the going rate, even though we now understand all of these little idiosyncrasies about the Jordan Poole situation that may make us feel different.
Look what it costs to get the reset, though. I mean, if there were a lot of belief that he was going to be worth every penny of that contract, you probably get a better offer than a 38-year-old kind of broken down point guard with a big ego. Instead, now you get that. Now that's not a horrible asset because it's a kind of a get out of jail free card to many NBA teams that may want to pivot off of their $25 or $30 million player in a year. And I think when it's all said and done, when you see where Paul goes on the back end of this, I think it will probably look good for the Warriors at that point.
I want to hit this again and see if some of you have some sort of basketball reaction to this. 888-957-9570, the first exchange with regard to Chris Paul meeting the Warriors assembled media.
You'd be coming off the bench, playing with the second unit that's a lot younger than the Warriors of the past have been with J.K. and Moses. Just what do you think of their depth, their bench players that you might be playing alongside?
You coaching?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what the situation is going to be yet. You know what I mean? So I think that'll be for us to figure out once we get going.
You've never come off the bench in your entire career. Is that something that you'd be willing to do?
Like I said, it'll be a conversation for us when camp starts or whatnot. But me and Steve have talked or whatnot. But that ain't something that you be like, "What up, man? Where you starting? You coming up?" You know what I mean? So I think we'll figure all that stuff out in camp.
Yeah, I just see it as he's offended by the premise, and that's fine. He's allowed to be offended by the premise. He's Chris freaking Paul. So
he's pushing back on the label. Because what if the Warriors decide they wanted to flip him somewhere else, and then he's going to be somebody else's starting point guard, but he's already kind of embraced this secondary role? I just think that when you're a star, you're not embracing a secondary role. You're just not.
Then that's a problem.
I know. It is a problem.
And that's what I'm getting at. Like, I think it's interesting that we've just all reached Julyville. So many of you. It's July. Mark, everything will be fine. What could go wrong with Warrior relationships? You've all already forgotten last year. All of you. All of you who are, not all of you, because not all of you disagree with me, but so many of you on the YouTube chat that I see and Twitter exchanges that I've had this weekend, you've all already forgotten last year because, oh gosh, here we go, making something out of nothing. You just watched a Warrior season go south because of internal relationships. You just watched it. Now, one of the most difficult internal relationship guys in the NBA, who we've rooted against his entire career, has joined the team and rejected the premise that we've all created, and we're going to act like that's not a thing.
I don't think it is a thing.
Because it's completely a thing.
Well, you think, okay, so it's one thing to push back on a media of question. It's another thing to now openly feud with Steph, Clay, the other guys in the backcourt that you're going to be playing with. Kerr, maybe, as
are any of
coach.
them willingly going to the bench? Should we go ask Clay and Steph? Hey, what do you think about Kuminga since you might be playing with him now? Because it doesn't sound like Chris Paul has plans to come off the bench. What's your reaction? I mean, should we do that now?
I mean,
none of them want to do that.
It's about it's about a lot of things. Can you handle the twilight of your career? Can you handle a second role or a different role than the role you've been in? Sounds like maybe he can't handle it. But you know what? Just because he can't handle it, initially when it's thrown in his face, that doesn't mean that he can't handle it in training camp when Steph's there, Steve's there, Kurt Clay's there, they're talking. I don't know. I guess I would say to you, what do you fear? What do you fear? Based on that soundbite, what do you fear from Chris Paul?
A repeat of what just happened with Jordan Poole.
That he's going to feud with
who most Warrior fans did not realize all year thought he should be starting. Like, this exact same issue is what was at the core of everything that just took place with the Warriors, which is Jordan Poole thinking he should start. Britch is too big. Therefore, veterans came back at him. One of them punched him. Accusations of who's getting the money. The ego is what just ruined the Warriors. And it's here now again, potentially in an even larger form. So I don't think we can minimize that. Who starts matters to them, even though it may not matter to us, right? I heard Bonte this morning, and he's right. I don't care who starts. I care more about who finishes. You know who cares if they start? They do. They've all told you.
Does Chris Paul, with $250 million in the bank, really, is he that petty he cares about starting?
Sounds like it.
Well, this is
Sounds
new.
like it to me.
I mean, it's just like anything else. Give him a minute to adjust to it. I don't think there's going to be problems. I don't fear Chris Paul having a dust up. There's a big difference between a guy who's done an awful lot and has been the alpha coming into a new room trying to adjust to a new culture than a young guy who's grown up in that environment now saying, hey, it's my time, guys, and kind of elbowing other guys out of the room. I don't see this as the same at all. I see Jordan Poole. Yeah, they ultimately want the same thing, which is playing time. But I think Jordan Poole was, a young ascending player, and this is a player that's got pelts on the wall and everybody's respect. Also, I think Jordan Poole doesn't necessarily know how to play basketball, and so probably, has to take more guidance from the other players, where Chris Paul knows how to play basketball.
Yeah, I get that part. I totally get that part. But by the same token, didn't Steve Kerr just go on Draymond's podcast, talk about how great things looked in Miami because every single person there accepted whatever role was given to him? Now, if Chris does that, great. That answer doesn't sound to me like somebody who is just going to take whatever role is thrown at him. It just doesn't sound like that.
That's fair, but I mean, if he's making those kinds of comments after this team gets together as a team,
that's worse.
in September, that's going to be a far different situation.